So the next significant thing was Sweet Shop.
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
Well, I'd actually was doing lots and lots of session work, and I was working for all the record companies, a lot of producers. I was learning about production by being a nice little drummer, and they would say, Phil, you know, how would you see this happening? And I would make a contribution, and I really believe that that's what a good session player or a person that wants to help makes a contribution. And I learned a little bit about producing. Never really got, you know, both feet in the water. But then I got a chance to work with this little band from Ruislip. And I was working for a music publisher called Robert Mellin. And I used to share a desk with Paul Nicholas, the actor Paul Nicholas. And he wasn't called Paul Nicholas when I originally knew him. He was a singer with Paul Dean and the Dreamers. And we would do Burton's Cricklewood on a Saturday night. They would do probably 11 till 12, and we would do 12 till 1. And then they'd go back on. And that's how the evening went. It was, you know, it was actually a bit of an Irish fight to music, but it was a great place to play. And so I knew him from those days. And of course, when I turned up at Robert Mellin and he was there, he went, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I could ask you exactly the same. I wasn't expecting to see him, and he wasn't expecting to see me." But he was hired as a song plugger, so he would actually go through the catalogue and play songs with various artists. That was his job. And I said, "Well, I am here because, you know, I'm here as the in-house producer." And he went, "Okay." The in-house producer's job at Robert Mellin, I was kind of like, I think, the third in line. There was a guy called Mike Smith that went to Decca and did all the Tremolos records, and he did loads of other stuff. And then you know, there was a succession of huge names, you know, before me. And these were kind of like really large boots to fill.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, you know, let's try and work together." I thought, great. It beats arguing about the phone, who gets the phone. It beats arguing about who gets the top drawer and who gets the other drawers, because that's how it kicked off. He said, "I've got a little band from Ruislip. I want you to come and see them." So we went down, and they were rehearsing, and I went in to look, and yeah, it was sweet, but they were called Sweet Shop.
Yeah.
And they did the most amazing Motown medleys, and I actually went to a few of their gigs, and they were really, really tight. I mean, all the harmonies were there. You know, the rhythm section was very, very tight. A good little band. So Robert Mellin didn't have a song really, and Paul was actually quite in with Robert Stigwood, and still is, and he would be playing me songs, Bee Gees songs, and I thought, you know, I can't ask Robert Mellin to pay to make records of Bee Gees songs because there's nothing in it for him. But these songs were actually pretty good. I mean, it's before the Bee Gees happened for the second time. But I found some songs, and there was a couple of songs in the catalogue that you know we did some studio work on, and it was okay. But you know, we did one deal with Fontana Records, a guy there called Jack Baverstock, who was really a really good man in the industry. I mean, you know, he signed so many hit bands, and I used to sit in the queue outside his office, and I used to watch Chris Blackwell come out with a red face, but I would hear.
Isn't that interesting? So he's in this position of power, A&R man, presumably.
Yeah.
and you have to sit in the queue.
Queue.
You go in,
Yeah.
you play a demo
Yeah,
or
oh,
whatever,
yeah, that's right.
and then you either
Yeah.
get a green light or red
but
light. And
people would come out. I saw Chris come out with a red face. Jerry Braun, I would hear maybe 30 seconds of "Come on without you, come on within," and it would suddenly go off. Then there'd be a bit of shouting, a few doors slamming, and Jerry Braun would come out with the tape under his arm and a red face, and he would go. Then I would
this is
hear,
the Mighty Quinn,
yes.
and it was rejected.
Well, the first mix was rejected.
I
He didn't
see,
like
I
it.
see, okay.
He didn't like it.
Yeah.
And Jack would he would reject everything. Who else I saw come out? Steve Rowland, who was a producer. He was producing Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick and Titch. And I would hear Xanadu, and suddenly it would stop, and I could hear Jack tearing into him, and he would come out red-faced. And there were some huge names that were that were in that office. And of course, when it came to my turn, and I had this little band called Sweet, and I went into him, and I was absolutely trembling. Because this guy, I thought he's going to chew my head off. Well, he didn't. He said, "So what do you think of that lot? How long have you been out there for?" So I said, "Well, I've heard it all." And he went, "Right," he said, "I want you here." He said, "I want you to remix Dave D, right? I want you to do this, I want you to do that." Yes, I said, "Jack, I can't do it." I said, "I'm just not experienced." He said, "No," he said, "you're going to be all right. You can do it." So I actually passed on Dave D, but he signed Sweet and put the record out.
This is Slow Motion, was it?
Slow Motion, yeah, absolutely. And they played as a support band at my wedding in 1969 to a trio. And the kids loved them. The kids were rocking about, but the mums and dads hated it all.
Yeah.
And and my father-in-law, I'll never forget, he says, "Go and take a long pee, go on, and let the kids enjoy themselves," because they were all with their fingers in the ears. And then when I had my first hit with Sweet, because I actually went and got them back because they signed to somebody else.
Yeah.
They all said, "Oh yes, we knew that band were going to make it. We always knew that band were going to happen." So yes, and I did. I lost them to Air London, which was George Martin's company.
And the first hit was Funny Funny.
Well,
Is that right?
that was with me, but I mean, they had, I think, 3 other records, turntable hits.
Right, but I mean, the first proper hit was Funny.
John Burgess produced them at Air London.
Right.
And then I had to sneak in because they had signed to Air and hadn't had any hits. And I said to them, "I've got some demos of some songs written by 2 writers that I'm involved with."
So they were, this is Chin and Chapman, but they were unknown at the time.
Yeah, everybody was unknown.
Yeah.
And I said, "Why don't you come to the studio, teach you the song, okay, and we will not break your contract. I'll pay you a session fee, and if you like what we can do together with this track," because the track was already down, Mike Chapman had already sung it, "we'll talk about it. If you hate it, then we'll go our separate ways." But my first meeting with Chin and Chapman was to talk about the chart. When we met, I'd already been working, trying to write songs with Nicky Chin for about 6 months, and we absolutely drew a blank looking at each other. And then he said, "I've met a waiter at Tramps, and he's got a very expensive guitar. It's got a Gibson. And he was in a band called Tangerine Peel." So I said, "Okay, we'll fetch him in." And they had written a few songs, and, they were all right. But then they brought something in, and I thought, this is quite interesting. And one of those songs was Funny Funny. So we went in and did a demo of Funny Funny, and Mike did all the voices, and I mixed it up, and it sounded pretty good. But we didn't have a band. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we had a band, that would, it would be our vehicle. And, I had briefed them about, the Arches. We
had a big hit with Sugar Sugar.
Sugar Sugar.
Yeah.
And I said, "Do you know what? This is They have got a great song, no artist, right? We've got an artist and we need a song. So there's the gap in the market. Why don't we do, you know, a Sugar Sugar? Let's do a little pop version. And that's what Mike came up with. He came up with Funny Funny.
So you, in effect, gave him the kind of the inspiration or the basis.
But we used to do this all the time. This is what we used to sit down. This was kind of like, it was a production meeting, like in today's terms, when you're making a movie or you're making a TV series, and you talk about where the story grows, how it grows, and what happens, and the characters change, and that's, again, I see that as my job. It's career building, and it's talking to the artist about their development. And I watched the Beatles do it, and I watched what other artists do. They kind of lead, if you like. They leave their followers, their fans.
But with the Suite, what was happening was the first certain Funny Funny and other hits, they weren't playing on the records, were they?
No, I played on their records.
You just had basically Brian Connolly singing.
Well, no, because the boys were very, very good singers.
So they were harmonising.
And the first records, yes, were made like that because they were made on a budget.
Yes.
And the boys, although they were musically good, they weren't great and they weren't quick.
Yes.
And we went in and we would do an A-side in a couple of hours. The track would be done. You know, a few overdubs. We get the boys in, do all the backup voices, a few overdubs, lead voice, mix, and in a day we were finished. So then I'd go to a little studio and the boys would let rip with their guitar riffs and what have you, and their Deep Purple type B-sides, because that's...
So they did the B-sides, but they weren't actually playing.
And then they let rip with that, and you know.
Yeah.
And then I was threatened with a walkout. He said, if we don't play on our own records, we ain't going to turn up.
But you have to understand their point of view.
So I said, okay. We got to a point in the career where we had success. So it didn't matter.
You had Funny Funny, Coco, Papa Joe,
and Little
the
Willie
Wigwam Band. They're all big hits, weren't
but
they?
Wigwam Band they played on.
They did.
That's
okay.
right. There was there was a mutiny threatened.
Okay.
And the mutiny was, let us play. So it's okay. If you can do it in the same time, then it's good for me.
Yeah.
And they went in there, and they were angry. They were angry. They were upset at me for actually saying that I was suppressing their talent, and they just wanted to show to me that they could do it, and they could do it better than me. And when they went in there, they went for it. They really went for it, and I said, "Okay, all right,
so
you win."
So they delivered. They did.
They delivered 110%.
Good for them. Yeah.
110%. And it was a good wind up. It was a great wind up, and that's what the boys and I actually had. I think they all really wanted to show me,
But
we
you
can
see,
do it.
They had the same determination as you, because they wanted to succeed just like you did.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah,
and I think that's what rock and roll is kind of. It's about succeeding. It's about moving boundaries.
Yeah, well, we'll move on to a band a bit later who a great example, actually, more determination and talent, but we'll come to that a bit later. So you also, did you produce Blockbuster and Hellraiser, the really big hits as well?
Ballroom Blitz.
Yeah, because they were #1 singles.
Yeah.
Not only in the UK, but across the world.
They were huge. Yeah, they were huge,
Yeah.
I was played Ballroom Blitz, and nobody knew what to do with Ballroom Blitz. The band said, well, what are we going to do with this, Phil? And I was planning another drum record, because I had already had two. I had Hear Me a Drummer Man, and then I had Going, Going, Gone, which was on Fontana, which Jack Baverstock put out. And I thought, I'm gonna put a drum record together. I'm gonna do something really, really, mad. I'm gonna do something mad. And then they played me Ballroom Blitz, and the boys are going, well, we don't know what to do with it. What do you think, Phil? And I was thinking to myself, do I throw my drum ideas into Ballroom Blitz? And I thought, you know what, this is, if we're going to do it, this is the time to do it, because that song and my ideas takes the band to another level. And I said to Mick Tuck, I said, Sandy Nelson. And he went, yes, it's great. I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be my Sandy Nelson record, but we're going to call it Ballroom Blitz. And he said, well, what do you mean? So I got behind the kit and I played, and he went, oh, great. And then when the band were rehearsing, I was actually playing drums. And we rehearsed it, and Mick said, come on, let me have a go. I said, fine. And that's it. And it was absolutely, do you know what? We rehearsed that on I think it was a Thursday and Friday, and we weren't booked in the studio until the Monday. And I was talking to the boys, and the rehearsal went so well that they actually couldn't wait for the Monday. Can we go tomorrow? Can we go and do it now? It was kind of like, you know, and when we got there on the Monday, they drove that session. You can actually hear the magic. They were playing magic because they couldn't wait to play it. And you can hear.
And you still made that song in a day, Ballroom Blitz?
Yeah.
Extraordinary. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
We rattled it off.
Yeah.
In fact, I think we made it in less than a day, because the track went down. We only did about 2 or 3 takes because it was there. There might have been a little bum note from a bass, and I said, we'll patch it because I'm not playing around with this. This is actually, I can hear this thing jumping off every player.
Well, it was the energy of the record, wasn't it?
Thank you. That's exactly it. Yeah. It's the energy, and if you capture it and the boys aren't tired, you can hear it. It's that, you know, they've got something to say, and then the voices went on, the overdubs went on, you know, then the lead voice went on, and I mixed it. And when I pulled the faders down, when I was mixing it, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. And my joke in those days was "Kajing," and it's been used a million times since then, because that was my little joke to the boys. I said, I actually think that's a #1 in America. I do think that's a #1 in America. Absolutely. You know,
those
it still
hairs
said
on the back,
the hairs on the back of your
they're
neck.
not wrong, are they?
No.
No.
No. It was kind of like, oh, where did that come from?
Yeah.
It's staggering.
Anyway, I need to move you on a bit. So, in the end, though, there was a lot of rows within Sweet, wasn't there?
Yep.
And somehow you stopped enjoying it.
Well, I you know, the back room had their own problems, and the boys had their problems, and then when they all came together, it became one huge problem. So yeah, there was. And
basically, Chin and Chapman took over the producing as well.
No, they didn't. That's what they wanted, but they never did.
Okay.
They never did. The band. I mean, I think Mike Chapman had a go and did. Oh, he did one single and it wasn't successful. And actually the boys were in limbo, and in the end they did Fox on the Run, and they produced it themselves.
That was a decent record too.
It was a decent record, and they did Oxygen, and they did that themselves.
Yeah.
So kind of taught everybody pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, it didn't work with them and Chapman, and I think they actually went. I think that was made in America. They went to America to work with him.
Yeah. So your next interesting project was working with Alex Harvey, the late Alex Harvey.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Just tell us briefly about that.